Should people interested in fine art even concern themselves with someone from the commercial art world? Ew. Welcome to the show, and in today's episode, we'll explore one of the most influential creative minds of the 20th century. Bill Bernbach didn't just revolutionize advertising, he completely changed how we think about creative communication then, now, and forever. His work for VW, Avis, and many other brands sparked a shift towards what would become known as the Creative Revolution, which was a shift towards honesty, simplicity, humanity, and artistry in communications. Today, we'll journey through 6 chapters of Bill's creative philosophies. Each one will be anchored by one or several of his famous quotes. Let's begin. So, Bill was born in Brooklyn by Jewish parents, and it seems that already from a really early age, he was pretty much an outsider. And if we think back to last week's episode about Andy Warhol, we see a clear parallel here already. By the way, dear listener, you might not even know who Bill Bernbach is. He's one of these characters or even icons that's incredibly famous inside his own industry, but outside the industry, he's relatively unknown, perhaps, to art directors, creative directors, writers, designers, many more. He is basically Elvis. But to a lot of people outside that world, he's Bill who? And so if you're a fine artist, you might ask yourself, why should I even be interested in this man? Why should I be interested in this at all? Well, for me, all sorts of art is fundamentally a dialogue between the maker and the spectator. You might disagree, some people do. We'll talk about that more in a minute. It needs to be mentioned here as well that Bill, of course, didn't create all his masterpieces on his own. He was surrounded by creative rebels, many incredibly talented and famous in their own right. Helmut Krone, for example, was one of his more famous art directors. He was the art director behind the incredibly famous VW ads of the 1960s. And if you've got any doubts whatsoever if that these guys weren't proper artists, just be reminded that you can go see Helmut's work still to this day in the MoMA and I believe other art museums as well. So, if you're on board, let's look at 6 different ways that Bill Bernbach changed the creative landscape and the art of creative communication forever. Number 1, he was a creative rebel. The first quote, "Playing it safe can be the most dangerous thing in the world." Now, if you want to understand how groundbreaking this was in the 1950s, we have to think of it as a backdrop against an industry that was completely run by formulas. Everything was meant to be sort of scientific, and the thought was that if you did certain things in a certain way, if you followed the formulas, you would have success. But Bill wouldn't have any of that. He was a rule breaker and a groundbreaker. Again, I draw a parallel to Andy Warhol here. Remember Warhol's mantra of always be different, no matter what, be eccentric if you will, but just be different or you won't get noticed. And if you think that was relevant then, but not so much now, then think, for example, about TikTok against other social media platforms. Before TikTok, it was all about follow and likes and so on. You followed certain people. TikTok did the complete opposite. It did away with this idea of following people. Instead, there was an endless scroll of just entertainment. It didn't matter so much who provided the entertainment. It mattered that you were entertained. It mattered that you were emotionally engaged. But even the most serious of fine artists, I think, can learn from this. No one is, of course, saying that your art should be light entertainment in any way, shape, or form. But if we exchange the word entertainment for engagement, then maybe that makes more sense. We all want to create art that engages, surely. Here's another quote from Bill on the theme of creative rebellion. Quote, "Rules are what artists breaks. The memorable never emerged from a formula. The memorable never emerged from a formula." Very, very powerful, I think. And he said other things like all creativity begins by questioning conventions. All creativity begins by questioning conventions. Very, very true, I think. He even said something along the lines of original is not just desirable, but it is a moral and artistic obligation. Originality not just being desirable, but a moral and artistic obligation. Wow. Number 2, he understood the unchanging human nature of the spectator. Now, it's easy to think that people change with each generation radically, but I don't believe we do. I agree with Bill here. The human nature is pretty much unchanging, and it has been for thousands of years. We get confused because we get new technology, so we apply human nature in new ways, and we confuse that with change. Or a quote from Bernbach himself, quote, "It took millions of years for human instincts to develop. It will take millions more for them to vary." Now, you might say that a true artist isn't concerned with the spectator, but as mentioned before, I disagree with that. And more importantly, many of the icons of the art world disagrees with that. For example, Duchamp wrote a text which I believe was called The Creative Act. And in that he writes, "The creative act is not performed by the artist alone. The spectator brings the work into contact with the external world. In other words, meaning isn't issued, it's negotiated." So I think we can safely say that many of the icons of the art world believe that the spectator is essential, and the feelings and the emotions of that audience really matter. And it certainly did to Bill Bernbach. Bill believed that the unchanging psychology of human nature mattered much, much more than temporary trends. He talked a lot about having respect for one's audience, treating them like they are intelligent, feeling human beings, which of course they are. He said something along the lines of, people respond to authenticity, not manipulation. And I think that is something we could certainly use as a guiding principle today. In other words, artistic communication treats the spectator not as a target, but as a partner. Again, this reminds me of Andy Warhol's mindset. If you agree or disagree or don't know, then go back to my Deep Dense episode on Andy Warhol. Number 3, his unquestioned belief in an emotive response to art. Quote, "You must get an idea in your head and your heart." When I was in art school, I was taught to start creating with your feelings and your emotions rather than on a pad, on a computer, on a canvas, on your mobile. And I think this teaching goes straight back to Bill Bernbach. It is all about how something feels. And I think that's why I'm personally such a fan of art with impact. And indeed why I want to do this channel where I draw parallels between art and impact. And true impact is felt in the gut. Or as Bill Bernbach would have put it, truth must be alive, human and emotional. Creativity resonates only when it speaks to universal human truths. Emotional truth is what makes any idea memorable. And this segues us beautifully into point number 4, his belief in the undiluted truth. Bill believed that all creativity starts with the truth. Quote, "The most powerful element in advertising is the truth. And truth isn't enough unless it's felt." Which takes us back to the previous point about making an emotional impact. And once again, I think we can track many of Bill's philosophies in a straight line to today. Authenticity is the mantra of all social media today, for example, but Bill was already there in the 1950s and 60s with his adherence to the truth. He created ads with crazy headlines that would say things, "This is for VW. Yes, it's ugly, but..." I mean, who in their right mind, even today, would selling cars would call your own car brand ugly? This is true creative rebellion. And it's all about the truth. Because they were ugly. So why not say that they're ugly? It's the truth. Everybody thinks it. So just say it. And even to this day, advertising is full of exaggerated claims, and we're the best, we're the biggest, we're the whatever. And I think it's one of the reasons why so many brands these days are moving. The rise of the influencer, for example, it's very, very difficult to any brand to build trust these days because they have such a long history of overclaims. So you have to lean on influencers, creators today to be able to deliver true authenticity or the truth, because that's the only thing that can build trust. And perhaps in today's world full of AI and fake this, fake that, our truth, our humanity is what we have left that is truly captivating and truly is the only thing that can have impact. Number 5, he promoted collaborations. Not sure if you know this, but before Bill, certainly in the commercial art world, people would work in silos very much. Writers would work with other writers or on their own, and so would designers, art directors, illustrators, whoever they might be. Bill completely changed this. He believed in collaboration and the idea that various different disciplines should work cross-disciplined instead. And he believed in different mindsets and that the idea that 1 + 1 = 3. Once you start to cross-pollinate creative thinking, he believed to more interesting art. Of course, in today's world where technology has helped us to make us all kind of one-man bands, we all direct, we all shoot, we all present, we all write, we all design, we all do everything, which is all good. Nothing wrong there, but sometimes let's not forget to collaborate because it does bring a different dimension to any kind of art that we pursue. Once again, Bill, I think, was so ahead of his time. He said, diversity of talent and perspective is what produces breakthrough ideas. Diversity of talent and perspectives is what produces breakthrough ideas. There's an old saying that I've heard in advertising, and when people work together, it's kind of like rubbing 2 bits of wood together, and it will spark. Especially if the 2 bits of wood don't necessarily at first glance agree with each other. And I think there's a real truth in that. So Bill is the father, the inventor of the creative team in advertising, and he said, as a quote, "An idea can turn into dust and magic depending on the talent that rubs against it." Again, rubbing talent. Or another quote, "The great creatives are the ones who can see patterns where others can see chaos." An acknowledgement that we all see different things when we look at something and how interesting it is to cross-pollinate different visions. Very, very good, Bill. Number 6, he understood context. Bill was a master of the art of comparison. And in the last episode, we talked about Warhol and his ability to see himself, his self-awareness and his awareness of the bigger picture, the culture around, the awareness of what's gone before, what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future, and seeing yourself in that context. And in the same way, I think Bill Bernbach, in a commercial art sense, was extremely aware of what had gone before. And going back to the idea of being a creative rebel, you need to be able to rebel against something. And in order to do that, you need to know what the other people are doing, what they have done. There's an old saying by someone, I don't know who, something along the lines of airplanes take off better against the wind. And I think it's such a good saying. As we know, Warhol reacted against abstract expressionism, Duchamp that we mentioned, and Dadaism reacted against what they considered bourgeois, traditional art. Everybody needs to react against something. I think Bill Bernbach reacted very much. If you look at the VW ads, for example, the car ads at that time in America was all about we're the biggest, we're the best, we're the this, we're the that, we're the most beautiful. And so, of course, his reaction to that was we're small, we're ugly, we're this, we're that, we're lemon. Or Avis, we're number 2, so we try harder. Making a feature out of not being number one somehow, being number two is better than being number one. It's wonderful. And the VW, think smaller. Makes me think of Steve Jobs, and when they I think it's in the 90s, the advertising campaign for Macintosh that was Think Different, clearly in homage to Bill Bernbach and VW. But in fact, the whole Apple brand, when you think about it, was kind of the anti-PC, wasn't it? You're reacting against Microsoft PCs. They are the establishment. We are the rebels. We're the fresh, we're the interesting, we're the exciting. So again, going back to the fine art world, the idea of doing the opposite, is if you want to be considered fresh, do the opposite. Or as Bill would put it, when everyone else shouts, try whispering. Or, to quote him, you don't have to shout to be heard. And he also said something which I really love, something along the lines of creative communication is about removing noise, not adding decoration. I think goes back to the truthful principle of his. It's about stripping away somehow. Don't try to cover up. Remove noise. Don't add decoration. Personally, I consider myself really lucky. I've actually worked many years ago at one of Bernbach's legacy agency, DDB London. This was, of course, many, many years after Bernbach has passed away. But it's sort of sad news right now as I record this, hearing that the DDB agency brand name is going to, or has indeed disappeared, and DDB is being integrated, I think, into TBWA, possibly. But I think as much as they might remove Bill's name from the door, his legacy certainly lives on. I mean, especially if we look at today's world, it's so full of noise, so full of algorithms and shouting for attention, and it just takes me back to his principles. I believe they will always work. Creativity that connects and elevates still falls back on the principles that he championed: truth, humanity, simplicity, and artistry. Thank you for listening, and as Bill would like to remind us, if you want to have impact, please embrace your genuine, unique truth, and most importantly of all, don't play it safe. Thank you, and see you next week.